It wasn't supposed to be a life-altering moment. Just a casual conversation over tea and toast, like the ones they'd shared the last 3 mornings. But that's how change often comes, not with fireworks or ultimatums, but with a quiet question in the soft light of morning. You ever think about getting away from the city? Ryan asked, his voice steady but unassuming. Harper curled up on the love seat near the open window, glanced at him over the rim of her mug. You mean like vacation? I mean like peace, he replied. Not escape. Just air that smells like something other than concrete. Harper chuckled. I live in a high-rise. My air smells like exhaust and delivery food. Ryan smiled. Then you're overdue for a change of scenery. Ellie, sprawled on the floor with her coloring books, chimed in without looking up. You should come see our garden. Daddy and Grandpa grow magic plants. Harper raised a brow. Magic? Ellie nodded solemnly. They don't talk, but they help people feel better. Grandpa says nature remembers how to heal even when we forget. Harper turned back to Ryan. Your dad's a philosopher. Ryan leaned back. He's a retired herbalist. Grew up in the Appalachian foothills. Swears by roots and rainwater, doesn't own a cell phone, believes plants can feel your sadness. Harper sipped her tea, amused. Sounds eccentric. He is, Ryan said. And he's usually right. A long pause followed. Harper looked out the window again at the city skyline, so familiar it had become invisible. Then, more softly than she intended, she said, maybe a few days away wouldn't be so bad. Ryan didn't press. He just smiled like someone who had planted a seed and trusted it would bloom in time. 2 days later, Harper was standing in front of a weathered wooden gate, suitcase in hand, watching a chicken cross the gravel driveway as if it owned the place. I already love it here, she murmured. The house was modest, 2 stories wrapped in climbing ivy and crowned with a wide, slanted roof. A porch swing creaked lazily in the breeze. Beyond the gate, Harper could see rows of raised garden beds, herbs, flowers and vegetables all in neat lines. It smelled like damp earth, rosemary, and something else she couldn't name. Ryan appeared from the side of the house, wiping his hands on a rag. His boots were muddy and a streak of dirt crossed his forearm, but his face lit up when he saw her. You made it. I figured if the plants don't heal me, at least the chickens will entertain me, she said, smiling. Careful, he warned. They get attached fast. Inside, the house was warm and lived in, not staged or polished like the city places Harper knew, but full of soul. Wooden beams overhead. Shelves filled with old books and dried herbs. Family photos in frames that looked touched by time. An elderly man emerged from the kitchen, drying his hands on a dish towel. He had kind eyes, a slow gait, and a quiet presence that made Harper feel instantly at ease. This is my dad, Ryan said. Everyone just calls him Document. Doc nodded politely, then looked at Harper's face, not with judgment or discomfort, but with curiosity and care. I've seen worse, he said bluntly. You're lucky, actually. Harper blinked. Excuse me. You scarred, sure. But the tissue's healing flat. And that means your body didn't give up. He studied her a second longer. Mind usually takes longer than skin to catch up. That's the part we'll work on. She wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. Doc motioned toward the back door. Come. Let me show you where the real medicine is. The garden behind the house was a tapestry of life. Rows of calendula and comfrey. Beds of lavender, sage, lemon balm. Towering stalks of echinacea. In one corner, a small bench sat beneath a blooming dogwood tree. Harper could feel her shoulders drop just stepping onto the path. Most folks want quick fixes, Doc said, leading her slowly through the rows. Creams. Lasers. Cover-ups. But healing's like gardening. You can't rush what needs time, light and care. Harper trailed her fingers across a line of soft mint leaves. And these plants, you think they help? I don't think, he said. I know. They've been healing people since before hospitals had hallways. He handed her a bundle of leaves. Calendula. Mix with rosehip oil. Warm compress every night. Give it 3 months. Harper took the leaves, cradling them like something fragile and precious. That night, after Ellie had fallen asleep and Ryan had gone to stack firewood, Harper sat on the porch with a notebook and a cup of herbal tea, her first mixture of Doc's blend. She didn't write much. Just a single sentence. Today I met a garden that looked at my scars and offered a song instead of silence. She exhaled slowly, letting the quiet wrap around her. The stars above were brilliant, unfiltered by city haze. Somewhere in the distance, a barn owl called into the night. Harper closed her eyes and let the stillness speak. And for the first time in over a year, she didn't feel broken. She felt planted. Mornings at the farmhouse began with birdsong, not alarm clocks or honking traffic, but the kind of music that made you pause before opening your eyes. Harper, wrapped in a hand-stitched quilt, lay still in the guest bedroom, watching sunlight trickle through gauzy curtains. For the first time in years, she didn't dread waking up. There were no meetings, no makeup chairs, no stage lighting designed to erase her imperfections. Just the quiet knowledge that the day ahead held no expectations. Only possibility. She made her way to the kitchen where Doc was already steeping herbs in a large ceramic pot. The scent of lemon balm, calendula and honey filled the air. "You're up late," he said without turning. "It's 7:12, Harper replied. Doc grunted. "I've been up since 4:30. The plants don't wait for fashionably late guests." She smiled. Point taken. He handed her a small cloth pouch. "Use this as a compress tonight. Warm water. 15 minutes. Every night. No excuses." Harper accepted the pouch like a prescription. There was something oddly comforting about following instructions that didn't come from a pharmacy or a plastic bottle. She joined Ryan and Ellie outside after breakfast, where they were weeding a patch of lavender. Ellie had a small watering can shaped like a ladybug and was humming a tune Harper didn't recognize but found herself swaying to. "Want to try?" Ryan offered, gesturing to the row of comfrey near the fence. Harper knelt carefully beside him. "You're trusting me with the plants already." "Trust is a seed," he said. "You've got to put it in the dirt before anything good can grow." She glanced at him sideways. Was that one of Doc's sayings? "Nope," Ryan grinned. "That one's mine." They worked side by side, dirt under their nails, sunlight warming their shoulders. It was messy, grounding, and absurdly satisfying. Harper found herself talking, not in grand, soul-bearing monologues, but in small, truthful bursts. About how silence had become her armor. How pity was harder to bear than cruelty. How the mirror had become something she avoided not out of shame, but fatigue. Ryan listened, not to fix, but to understand. Ellie would occasionally interrupt with stories about their chickens or the time she tried to teach a butterfly to sit on her finger for more than 3 seconds. By the end of the day, Harper's hands ached and her back protested, but her spirit felt lighter, as though each weed she pulled had taken some old sorrow with it. That evening, Doc found her on the porch with a bowl of warm water, following his instructions. She soaked the herbal pouch and gently pressed it against her cheek, the one with the worst scarring. The warmth seeped into her skin, and with it came an unexpected softness. Not just physical, but emotional. "You know what makes healing so frustrating?" she asked when she noticed Doc standing nearby. He sat beside her. "Everything." Harper laughed quietly. "You can't rush it. And just when you think you're better, something rips you open again." Doc nodded. "That's how scar tissue forms. Not just skin, the soul too. It builds where the break was, stronger, but tighter. Less flexible. She looked down. So it never goes back to what it was. No, he said. It becomes something new. The days passed in a rhythm Harper hadn't known she needed. Morning tea with wild honey. Tending to the garden in borrowed boots that were 2 sizes too big. Evening walks with Ellie along the creek trail, where the child's endless curiosity about dragonflies and cloud shapes reminded Harper that wonder hadn't vanished, it had just gone quiet. Her skin began to respond, slowly, subtly. The tightness along her jaw loosened. The redness faded to a soft pink. The raised edge of the worst scar began to flatten almost imperceptibly. But it wasn't just her face. Her laughter came easier. Her breath felt deeper. One afternoon, she caught herself singing softly while hanging laundry in the sun. The most surprising change came from within the mirror one morning. Harper studied her reflection, expecting to flinch like she always had. Instead, she leaned in, traced the curve of her scar with a fingertip, and whispered, not to herself, but to the woman staring back, "Thank you for surviving." A few days later, Ellie presented her with a drawing. It was Harper standing in the garden surrounded by flowers. Her scar was there, plainly drawn, but it sparkled with gold. "It's not broken," Ellie explained. "It's magic." Harper stared at the paper for a long moment, unable to speak. Children, she thought, saw what adults had forgotten how to look for. That night, Ryan joined her on the porch. "You've changed," he said, not as a compliment, but as a quiet observation. Harper didn't deny it. "It's strange. Nothing dramatic has happened. No epiphany. No speech. Just, life." He said, "Happening." She nodded. He looked at her for a long time, then said softly, "You know what I think? I think the garden isn't healing you. I think you're healing the garden. Every time you show up. Every time you laugh. Every time you choose to stay, you remind all of us what it looks like to come back to life." Harper turned her gaze to the stars. "Coming back to life," she repeated. "I like that." And she meant it. Because the truth was, this place hadn't erased her scars. It had made space for them. And somehow, in that space, something tender had begun to grow. It started with a blank page. Harper had been staring at it for nearly 20 minutes, pen in hand, as the sky outside her window turned from pale gold to the soft blush of early evening. A breeze drifted in through the screen, carrying the faint scent of lavender and rain-soaked soil. The house was still. Ellie and Ryan had gone to town for groceries. Doc was in the back shed organizing jars of dried herbs with the precision of an apothecary monk. And Harper, alone, undistracted, could no longer outrun the quiet. The notebook in front of her was leather-bound, gifted by Doc a few days earlier. "Thought you might want a place to leave things behind," he'd said, handing it to her without ceremony. Leave things behind. She didn't realize until now how heavy that phrase truly was. The pen touched paper. And slowly, hesitantly, she began to write. "Dear me before the fire. You were beautiful. That's what they told you, wasn't it? They said it when you walked into rooms. When you smiled for the camera. When the lighting was perfect and your hair curled just right. They said it so often you started to believe it was your only currency. But you were more than your face. You were sharp. You were quick. You carried kindness like it was armor. You made strangers feel seen. You filled rooms with warmth that no makeup artist could ever manufacture. And I'm sorry you never believed any of that. I'm sorry you thought your worth would vanish with your reflection. You were never just a face. You were, and are, a whole damn soul. Love. The version of you still standing." She paused, letting the words settle. Her eyes blurred slightly, but she didn't wipe away the tears. Let them fall. Let them cleanse. Then she turned the page. "Dear me right after the fire. I hated you. I know that's hard to read, but it's the truth. I hated the way you looked. The way people looked at you. The way they didn't. The silence that came with pity. The rooms that emptied faster when you entered them. I hated how small you became. How you pulled your hair over your face. How you apologized for existing. But now I see it. You were grieving. Not just your beauty, your identity. Your future. Your illusion of control. You had to bury the life you thought you'd have, and no one showed up for the funeral. Not even you. But here's what I admire about you, even in your ugliest hour, you didn't give up. You kept breathing. Kept moving. Kept trying, even when it felt like drowning. You're the reason I'm still here. And I'm proud of you. Love. The woman learning to forgive. A knock came at the door just as she finished the final sentence. It was Ryan. I brought you tea, he said, holding a mason jar of iced lemon balm and honey. Thought you might be writing. She smiled softly. I was. Letters. To who? To myself. He handed her the jar, then sat on the porch steps, glancing up at her with curiosity but no pressure. Want to read one? He asked. She hesitated. They're raw. So is healing, he replied. Harper opened to the first page and began to read aloud. Her voice didn't tremble, not because she wasn't scared, but because the words were finally ready to be heard. When she finished, Ryan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, You know, I wish Rachel had written letters like that for Ellie. For herself. Harper nodded. Sometimes I think we wait for someone else to validate our story. But maybe the most powerful thing we can do is tell it to ourselves. Ryan looked at her with something deeper than admiration. It was reverence, for her honesty, her grit, her return. You're not who you were before, he said. But I don't think you lost anything. I think you became more. More. She'd never thought of it that way. I'm still learning who that woman is, she admitted. Ryan leaned in just slightly. So am I. Later that night, Harper added a third letter. Dear me today. You're not finished. You're not perfect. But you are present. And that's enough. You laughed with a child today. You let someone touch your face without flinching. You stared at the stars without wishing you were someone else. You're not healed. But you're healing. And that's sacred. Love. The woman becoming whole. She closed the notebook, placed it on her nightstand, and turned off the light. For the first time in over a year, she didn't dream of fire or mirrors. She dreamed of gardens. Of soft light. And of a voice, her own, whispering, You're still here. And that's beautiful. The sky turned green, not the soft mossy green of spring leaves or the emerald shimmer of wild grass. This was the eerie, bruised green that came before something violent. Something ancient. Harper stood at the edge of the porch, mug in hand, staring out at the horizon. The wind had shifted. The trees weren't rustling, they were bracing. Birds had gone silent. Somewhere in the distance, a low roll of thunder growled like a warning. Ryan stepped out beside her, phone in hand, eyes narrowed. Radar says we've got maybe 20 minutes. Big one. Could turn tornadic. Harper's throat tightened. Maybe, maybe not. But we're not taking chances. He looked at her, his tone suddenly gentle. It's okay. We've got a storm cellar. Built it last year. Ellie's already packing snacks like we're going camping. Harper tried to smile, but her chest felt tight. Her fingers gripped the mug too hard, and it slipped slightly, hot liquid splashing across her wrist. She didn't feel it. Only the sound of rain beginning to tap the roof brought her back. Hey. Ryan stepped closer. You're safe. I promise. But her breath was quickening now. Her vision tunneling. The air, though cool, felt suffocating. Fire. Smoke. Screaming. Wood splitting like bones. The heat licking her skin. It was all coming back. I need a minute, she whispered, turning and rushing inside. In the guest room, Harper shut the door and pressed her back against it as though it could hold back the memories. But they poured in anyway. The night of the fire. The way the smoke crawled into her lungs. The heat so intense it felt like a living thing. The moment the mirror shattered, taking half her face with it. The screams that didn't sound like hers. She sank to the floor, clutching her knees, rocking slightly. Her mind knew this storm wasn't fire. But trauma didn't care for logic. Trauma had its own language. And right now, it was screaming. A soft knock. Then Ryan's voice, muffled but calm. "Harper. We need to go downstairs. It's time." She couldn't answer. She couldn't move. The knob turned. A pause. Then the door opened just wide enough for him to step in. He didn't speak right away. Didn't reach for her or offer a pep talk. He simply sat down beside her. Waited. Matched her breathing, shallow for shallow, then slower, deeper, until she felt his calm begin to steady hers. When she finally looked up, her face was pale, streaked with tears. But her voice was steadier. "I thought I was over it." Ryan shook his head gently. "You don't get over things like that. You walk through them again and again until the fire no longer owns you." She exhaled shakily. "I'm scared." "I know," he said. "So was I when Rachel died. For months after, I slept with the light on. I check Ellie's breathing 5 times a night. Grief rewires your fear. But that doesn't mean you're weak." Thunder cracked overhead, sharp and sudden. Harper flinched. Ryan extended his hand, open, waiting. "Come with me. Not because the storm will hurt you, but because it's okay to let someone else hold your hand while it passes." She stared at it, at his palm, calloused but steady. And for the first time in a long time, she reached out, not to survive, but to be supported. The storm cellar was small, cool, and smelled faintly of cedar and earth. A single lantern flickered in the corner. Ellie sat on a pile of pillows wearing headphones, happily coloring with a flashlight clipped to her shirt like a miner. She was left at the altar, her veil trembling with every breath. Not from nerves, but from shame. A bride with scars no one wanted to see, until a single dad knelt beside her, kissed her hand, and whispered, "You're beautiful." What happened next wasn't just a love story. It was a story of healing. Of choosing light after fire. And of a woman who learned that the right person doesn't fix you, they see you. If stories of kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of love speak to your heart, subscribe to the channel. Let's journey together through moments that restore hope. Moments that remind us, sometimes, the most beautiful beginnings come after everything falls apart. The laughter had stopped outside the bridal suite. Guests shuffled in confusion, their heels tapping nervously against polished floors. Whispers swelled like distant thunder. Harper sat motionless in front of the ornate mirror, her hands clasped tightly on her lap. White satin gloves, still pristine. Untouched by what had just unfolded. She didn't need to look up. She could still hear his voice, flat, trembling, cowardly. I just can't do this, Harper. Not like this. Not with everyone watching." He hadn't even had the decency to close the door gently. The slam echoed through her bones. A full hour had passed. Maybe more. The clock had lost meaning the moment she'd been left alone in her wedding gown. The makeup artist had fled. The wedding planner had vanished. Even her sister had quietly excused herself, unable to meet Harper's eyes. No one knew what to say to the woman whose face bore more than just scars. The left side of her face still held a trace of old beauty, the kind that had once earned her a morning talk show slot and millions of smiling viewers. But the right side told a different story. Uneven skin. Thin ridges. Faint discoloration from the house fire a year ago. A freak accident, the media had called it. An act of God, the insurance had said. Harper had stopped calling it anything. It simply was. She gently lifted her veil, the delicate lace catching on her earrings, and stared into her own reflection. The gown fit like a dream. Ivory silk, hand-stitched. A gift to herself in a moment of bravery. 3 months ago, she had dared to believe in love again. Dared to believe someone could look past the veil and see her. But maybe she had only been fooling herself. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. She didn't respond. The door creaked open. "Sorry," a small voice said. "I thought the princess might still be here." Harper turned her head. A little girl, maybe 6, maybe 7, stood shyly in the doorway. She wore a pink dress with too many ruffles and held a small bouquet of wildflowers, clearly picked from outside. Her eyes were wide and blue, full of questions and absolutely no judgment. "I'm Ellie," the girl announced. "You look like the brides in storybooks." Harper blinked. "No, I don't," she said quietly, her voice rough from disuse. Ellie stepped in closer. "You do. Like the warrior princess kind. My daddy says scars mean you survived something hard. That's cooler than magic." Before Harper could respond, a man appeared at the door, tall, slightly unshaven, wearing a black apron over his dress shirt. "I'm so sorry," he said. "She slipped away from me." He gently ushered Ellie behind him, then paused. His eyes met Harper's. He didn't look away. Not once. "I'm Ryan," he said simply. "I work in the kitchen. We were just leaving. I didn't realize." Harper gave a slight nod. "It's all right. Most people don't." There was a silence that stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Ryan seemed to sense something in her that others didn't. Not pity. Not fear. Just presence. Then, to her surprise, he took a slow step forward. "If I may," he said softly. And without waiting for permission, he knelt beside her chair, gently reached for her hand, the one trembling slightly in her lap, and pressed a kiss to the back of her glove. "You're beautiful," he whispered. "Not because of how you look, but because you're still standing." Harper felt the tears rise before she could stop them. Not from sadness. Not even from relief. But from something far deeper. The ache of being seen. Truly seen. For the first time in so long. Ellie peeked out from behind her father and added matter-of-factly, "Daddy says people who walk through fire and come out kind are the rarest kind of beautiful." A soft laugh escaped Harper's throat, half sob, half astonishment. Ryan stood slowly. "We'll leave you be. But if you ever feel like getting coffee that doesn't taste like hotel lobby water, there's a diner across the street. Tell them Ryan sent you." He turned to go. "Wait," Harper said suddenly. Her voice was stronger now. They both looked back. She wasn't sure what had made her speak. Maybe it was the gentleness in his eyes. Maybe the way Ellie smiled without fear. Or maybe it was the fact that, for the first time in over a year, someone had touched her hand without flinching. Would you and Ellie like to have tea?" she asked. Ryan blinked. "Now. I think I have enough cups," Harper said, her lips lifting in the faintest smile. And just like that, the quiet room, once heavy with grief and silence, began to breathe again. Ellie giggled. Ryan stepped back inside. Harper stood, her veil forgotten on the chair, and walked toward something she hadn't felt in a long, long time. Hope. The tea was chamomile. Slightly too strong, a bit oversteeped, but warm. Harper poured it slowly into the mismatched cups she had found in the cabinet, remnants from bridal shower gifts. A few chipped, but still intact. Like herself. She placed them on the small table by the window, where the golden hour cast soft light across the room. The wedding bouquet lay forgotten on the windowsill, its white roses already beginning to wilt. Ryan accepted his cup with a quiet nod of thanks. Ellie, legs swinging back and forth, added 3 cubes of sugar to hers before sipping and declaring it fancy hotel tea. Harper smiled. It wasn't the kind of smile she had learned to wear for cameras. It was hesitant. Small. But real. Silence settled between the three of them. Not awkward. Just unfamiliar. Harper studied Ryan from across the table. There was a calmness about him, not forced, not performative. He seemed entirely present. He didn't glance at his phone. He didn't shift in his seat. His eyes, gray with faint flecks of blue, rested gently on her face. And miraculously, did not linger on the scars. That alone felt like a miracle. "You're really calm," she said at last, stirring her tea without looking up. "Most people don't know what to say." Ryan gave a soft laugh. "That's probably because I never say the right thing." "Maybe that's what makes it right," she replied. Ellie, busy dunking a cookie in her tea, looked up. "Are you a princess or a warrior?" Harper blinked. "Excuse me?" "Daddy says some people are both," Ellie said. "Like you. You wear the pretty dress, but you didn't cry when the bad guy ran away." Harper's breath caught. Ryan looked slightly mortified. "Ellie." But Harper reached across the table and placed her hand over the girl's. "It's okay. She's not wrong." For a moment, Harper let herself imagine what she must look like in Ellie's eyes. A broken bride who didn't fall apart. Who poured tea for strangers and smiled through the ashes. Maybe that version of her was closer to the truth than she realized. "I'm sorry about what happened," Ryan said gently. Harper's gaze dropped. "You don't even know what happened." Ryan tilted his head. "A man who runs away from a woman like you on her wedding day? I don't need the full story." Her heart twitched at "a woman like you," because he had said it without pity. Without pity's twin, reverence. Just matter of fact. Like she was still worth loving. "What about you?" she asked. "You're here with a daughter." "That's unusual." He smiled, and it reached his eyes. "Widower. My wife passed 4 years ago. Breast cancer." Ellie was 3. Harper's voice softened. "I'm sorry." "Me too," he said simply. "There are days I still look for her in the grocery store." That admission, so bare, so unguarded, settled into the room like truth. Harper nodded slowly. "I lost my job. My face didn't fit the morning news anymore. Sponsors pulled out. Ratings dropped. I became invisible." "But you're not invisible," Ellie said, frowning. "I saw you first." Harper laughed again. And this time, it reached her chest. The girl was a light bulb in a room full of shadows. "You two always crash weddings?" she asked. Ryan shrugged. "Only the good ones." She raised an eyebrow. "You think this one was good?" He looked at her for a long moment, then said, "It brought me to this table." Harper stared into her tea, willing herself not to cry again. Her hands trembled just slightly. Ryan noticed. "You don't have to be brave right now," he said. "But I do," she whispered. "Because everyone else left." Ryan leaned in, his voice steady. "Then let me stay." 3 words. So simple. So undemanding. But they cracked something deep inside her that no speech, no apology, no bouquet could have reached. He didn't promise to fix her. He didn't ask her to smile. He just offered his presence. And that, in a world that recoiled at what it didn't understand, was a kind of healing she hadn't known she needed. "Why?" she asked quietly. Ryan looked at her. Then truly looked at her. "Because my daughter thinks you're a warrior. And she's rarely wrong." When Ryan and Ellie finally rose to leave, the sun had set, and the light in the bridal suite had turned soft and golden. "I'll walk you out," Harper said. She stood at the door as they reached the exit. Ellie turned and gave her a tight hug. "Don't forget," the little girl said seriously. "Warrior princesses don't hide. They shine." Harper watched as they disappeared into the hallway. For the first time in over a year, she didn't rush to cover her face when she stepped out of the suite. Maybe the veil she needed to remove had never been the lace one. Maybe it had always been fear. The next morning, Harper awoke to silence. Not the heavy, soul-crushing kind that had filled her apartment since the fire. But a gentler hush. The kind that wrapped around her like a warm quilt, where nothing demanded from her, and no one expected smiles on cue. She hadn't slept that well in months. Still in her robe, she walked barefoot into the kitchen. The kettle was already warm from the early sunrise light filtering through the window. So she brewed another pot of chamomile, her comfort routine. But today, it tasted different. Less like an escape. More like a ritual. She poured a second cup, then paused, amused at herself. No one else was coming. Yet. Part of her wished someone would. She thought of Ellie's small hand reaching out. Of Ryan's steady eyes. And the quiet strength in his voice when he said, "Then let me stay." He had meant it. That, more than anything, had shaken her. The knock on the door came not long after. Harper froze, not out of fear, but disbelief. She opened it cautiously to find Ellie holding a small potted plant in both arms, her tiny brow furrowed in concentration. "It's lavender," Ellie said. "We thought you should have something pretty to look at when you drink your tea." Ryan appeared behind her, smiling sheepishly. She insisted. Harper stepped aside. "Well, far be it from me to argue with royalty." They settled into the same chairs by the window, like the night before had been a prelude to something unfolding. Gently. Naturally. Harper brought out buttered toast and honey. Ellie dipped hers into tea again, declaring it her new favorite breakfast. "So," Harper began, looking at Ryan. "You're just going to show up every morning with tea plants and compliments?" "Only on the days that end in Y," he replied. She laughed, not out of politeness, but genuine amusement. It felt good. Strange, but good. As Ellie wandered off to the corner with a picture book, Harper leaned back, gazing at the lavender plant. "It's odd," she murmured. "How something small can feel so seen." Ryan nodded, his fingers tracing the rim of his cup. "You've spent a lot of time being unseen." Harper hesitated. The answer was yes, of course. But how to explain the layers of visibility she'd once carried? How being famous didn't mean being known? How the spotlight could feel like fire when it turned cold? She exhaled. "Before the fire, I was on television 5 days a week. Morning shows. Light segments. Coffee with Harper, that was my thing. Everyone thought they knew me. People stopped me at grocery stores to ask about my hair, my smile, my shoes." She looked down. "And after, no one stopped me anymore. Or if they did, they stared. Or whispered. Or offered me that smile, you know the one. The kind laced with pity. Like they'd seen enough hospital dramas to know how to feel sorry for me, but not enough life to know what to say." Ryan didn't interrupt. He just listened, in that rare, precious way people sometimes forget how to do. Harper continued, more quietly now. "The man who left me yesterday, David, he used to tell me he loved my resilience. Said I was strong. Said my scars didn't bother him. But the closer we got to the wedding, the more he flinched when I took off my makeup. When I suggested not wearing a veil at all, he panicked. She swallowed. I think he wanted to marry the woman he remembered. Not the one who survived. Ryan's jaw clenched subtly, but he didn't speak. Sorry, Harper said, shaking her head. That's a lot for morning tea. No, Ryan said. That's honesty. And it's brave. She glanced at him, unsure how to respond. You don't owe anyone the version of you that makes them comfortable, he added. Especially not someone who only loved you when you were easy to look at. The words landed in her chest like a stone, heavy, but grounding. A quiet moment passed before Harper asked, "What about you? You seem like someone who knows a thing or two about grief." He nodded slowly. Rachel, my wife, she used to laugh like sunshine. When the chemo stole her hair, she called herself Captain Baldy and made Ellie wear matching beanies with glitter on them. She fought like hell. But in the end, she made me promise something. What was that? Harper asked. That I wouldn't raise Ellie in a house that was full of ghosts, he said. That I'd find a way to let the light back in. Harper blinked, tears pricking behind her eyes. And have you? Ryan looked at his daughter, sprawled on the carpet humming to herself. I think I'm learning how, he said. They fell into a quiet companionship after that, sipping tea as the morning grew bright around them. There were no big revelations. No dramatic declarations. Just a slow softening. Like ice thawing beneath the early sun. When it was time for them to leave, Ellie clutched Harper's hand and whispered, "You should come see our garden sometime. We grow all sorts of stuff. Even funny-shaped tomatoes." Harper laughed. Funny-shaped tomatoes sound perfect. Ryan held her gaze a moment longer before saying, "You're welcome anytime. You don't have to stay hidden up here." She nodded. But as she watched them walk away down the hallway, she realized something had already changed. She had let them in. Not through grand gestures or rehearsed charm. But through the simple, terrifying act of being real. And somehow, in that honesty, she felt less alone. Maybe, just maybe, the healing had begun. Harper settled into the corner opposite, wrapping a blanket around herself. Ryan sat close but didn't crowd her. The wind outside howled now, angry and insistent. Rain pelted the roof in sheets. But inside, it was quiet. Safe. Ellie, oblivious to the storm's violence, lifted her drawing. It's us. Mommy's in the sky watching the garden. And Harper's here too. And Daddy smiling, that's rare. Ryan chuckled. You're not wrong. Harper smiled faintly. Your daughter's a force of nature. So is her father, Ryan said, his voice soft. But you're the storm that learned how to rain gently. She looked at him, startled. You scare people, Harper. Not because of your scars, but because you survived something that would have broken most. And you came out the other side with grace. That kind of resilience, it unsettles the world. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I didn't come out with grace. I came out angry. Bitter. Hollow. Ryan shook his head. You came out real. And now you're becoming whole. When the storm finally passed, when the rain softened and the wind grew bored, they climbed the steps together. The sky was still dark, but the worst had moved on. The porch was soaked. Leaves scattered. One of the garden beds had partially flooded. But the house stood firm. So did they. Harper stepped outside hand, sunlight streaming through the trees. Her heart beat steadily, not with nerves, but with a sense of arrival. Of coming home to herself. There was no veil. She'd chosen not to wear one, not to reject a tradition, but to reclaim her truth. There was nothing left to hide. Her face, radiant in the morning light, bore only the faintest trace of the scar, a soft curve like a brushstroke across her cheek. But she hadn't covered it. She hadn't even thought to. Because this day wasn't about erasing what had been. It was about honoring what had survived. The music began, just a single acoustic guitar played by Ryan's childhood friend. Ellie led the way down the aisle, dropping petals from a basket she'd insisted on painting herself. As Harper stepped forward, every face turned toward her. And no one looked away. There was no pity in their eyes. Only reverence. Admiration. Love. When she reached Ryan, he didn't just smile. He saw her, the way he always had, and he whispered so only she could hear, "You're the most beautiful woman I've ever known." Harper blinked away the tears. "Not because I'm perfect." "No," he said. "Because you're real." The ceremony was short. Doc officiated, reading from a small notebook he pretended not to take seriously, but Harper noticed how his hands trembled ever so slightly as he spoke. "You've both walked through fire," he said, voice deep and steady. "You've lost. You've rebuilt. And now you've chosen each other, not in spite of the ashes, but because of them." He looked at Harper, then at Ryan. "Marriage isn't about rescue. It's about recognition. It's saying, I see you. I choose you. Not once, but every day." Ryan slipped the ring onto her finger, the same hand-carved silver band with the dogwood etching. Harper took his hand in return, her voice sure and clear. "With you, I don't feel like I've been fixed. I feel like I've been found." The crowd exhaled in a collective hush. Then Doc smiled and said the words Harper never thought she'd hear again, at least not meant for her. "You may kiss the bride." The kiss was soft. Certain. Not the kind meant for cameras, but for memory. And when it was over, the crowd erupted, not in polite applause, but in real, joyous noise. Laughter. Cheers. Ellie doing a little spin that knocked over 2 chairs. Harper laughed too. And it wasn't until that moment that she realized something profound. She had stepped into this day, into this life, not as a survivor clinging to love, but as a woman ready to give it fully. Fearlessly. Reception and revelations. The reception was homemade and heartfelt. Pie instead of cake. Lemonade instead of champagne. Ellie gave a speech about how Harper was now her bonus mommy, and how she hoped they could plant a sunflower named Mrs. Harper in the garden. Carla cried quietly at the back. Even Doc looked suspiciously misty-eyed as the sun dipped low. Ryan took Harper's hand and led her to the edge of the field. "I have one more gift," he said. He pointed toward the garden beds, freshly turned, a new row prepared. A small sign had been staked into the soil. "Harper's Healing Garden." Harper laughed, her voice catching. That's too much." "It's not," Ryan said. "It's exactly what you've done, for me. For Ellie. For yourself." She looked at the garden, at the rows of herbs she now knew by name, the beds where she'd knelt not to bury the past but to root something new. And for a moment, she said nothing. She just breathed deeply. Gratefully. That night, long after the guests had gone and the lanterns had dimmed, Harper stood alone under the dogwood tree. She traced her fingers along the bark, now warm from a long day of sun, and she whispered, not to the wind, not to the sky, but to the woman she used to be. "You made it. Not flawless. Not untouched. But whole." In the quiet that followed, Ryan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "I think the veil is gone for good," he murmured into her hair. Harper turned to him, her eyes shining. "No," she said. "The veil was never the problem. It was just easier than saying I was afraid." He kissed her forehead. "And now?" "Now," she smiled, "I'm in love. Not just with you, but with the life I thought I lost." Epilogue, the story continues. Before you go, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? This little storytelling corner of the internet has welcomed hearts from all around the world, and it warms mine to know you're here. If this story touched something in you, if you believe in second chances, in the quiet power of kindness and love, please consider subscribing to the channel, so we can share more moments like this together. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you for spending your time here. Your presence means more than you know. Until next time, stay kind, stay open, and never stop believing in the beauty of healing.